Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be heading back to New Jersey in 1991 to look at the disappearance of Timothy Wiltsey and a case which would still be making news headlines over 30 years later. With many twists and turns along the way, this is a devastating case of a young life lost and leads me to the question, innocent or guilty? What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Also, after today's case, I have some exciting news to share with you about the channel, so stay tuned until the end to find out what will be coming next on the Crime Reel. On the 25th of May 1991, 5-year-old Timothy William Wiltsey spent the morning playing outside of his house. Neighbours recall seeing the young boy that day, who was described as being well behaved and bright. He also loved to dig holes and was obsessed with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Timothy's mother, Michelle Lodzinski, had decided to leave home at about 3 p.m. to take Timothy to Holmdel Park to pet the animals and then on to the carnival at the John F. Kennedy Park in Sayreville. Michelle's boyfriend, Fred Bruno, was working that evening, so he could not accompany them to the carnival as he had done the previous year. At the carnival, Michelle left Timothy in a queue for a ride while she quickly slipped away to buy a drink. She returned minutes later and Timothy was gone. Believing that her son had just wandered off, she began searching for him with the help of her 15-year-old niece, who was also at the carnival. Unable to find him, panic began to set in and Michelle alerted the carnival security. The event was shut down and a search involving local and state police officers, firefighters, first aid personnel and public volunteers was soon underway. There was no trace of the young boy. As concern grew and the hunt for Timothy expanded, police helicopters, sniffer dogs and trained divers were brought in to help search the area. Timothy's description was circulated: 5 years old, 3 feet 4 inches tall, weighing around 45 pounds, with light brown hair and brown eyes. He was wearing a red vest top, red shorts and a pair of white Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle trainers. He had a light scar on his right cheek where a dog had bitten him just before his 3rd birthday. The police began interviewing those who knew Timothy and also those who had been present at the carnival that evening. Timothy's father, George Wiltsey, was contacted. He lived in Iowa and hadn't seen his son since Timothy was just 6 months old. It was confirmed that he had no interest in gaining custody of Timothy and that he was in Iowa at the time of his disappearance. A woman at the carnival, who was buying a drink at the same time as Michelle, recalled seeing a man who looked out of place. Fred Bruno, Michelle's boyfriend, was interviewed, with some who knew him stating that he did not have a good relationship with Timothy and that the young boy was scared of him. The police received many calls from people who believed that they had seen Timothy that day. However, no one recalled seeing Timothy at the carnival. As the carnival was dismantled, the search continued in case Timothy had got trapped or was hiding in some of the equipment, but still, nothing. Despite an extensive search of the area, no trace of Timothy could be found. The police handed out flyers and continued to question carnival goers and employees. A 20-year-old worker became the only person to say that he was fairly sure that he had seen Timothy at the carnival. By the 27th of May, 2 days after Timothy's disappearance, the search had been upgraded to a national manhunt and the FBI were brought in to help. As the days passed and no leads were forthcoming, Michelle withdrew into her house, shutting the curtains and getting friends and family to deal with visitors and telephone calls. Some people started to question her behaviour. It was reported that some of the people in town had noted with some curiosity that Lodzinski did not cry the night Timothy first disappeared. And also, many have wondered why a mother searching for her only child would give up the chance to go on major network news shows to talk about him. Why isn't she talking? What is she hiding? Michelle did grant a few interviews and appear on a couple of television shows to bring attention to her son's disappearance, stating that she was doing everything I can to help my son, adding, "I'm not trying to hide anything, I'm just not a good talker. I just wish they," as in the reporters, "would stop calling me. They call all night. They call at 6:30 in the morning. I can't sleep. They keep badgering me." On the 31st of May, 6 days after Timothy's disappearance, a 90-second segment was aired during America's Most Wanted in the hope of generating more leads. Whilst more leads were indeed generated, false rumours began to circulate that a body had been recovered and Michelle and her boyfriend, Fred, had been arrested. Several local shop owners began removing the posters of the missing boy from their windows, and the authorities and press had to reiterate that these rumours were not true. Timothy was still missing. A possible sighting by 2 boys on Staten Island raised hopes, but proved to be a false lead. Meanwhile, Michelle spent time with John Monty, a psychic from New York. John, who was not being paid for his work, claimed that he saw the boy run from the Ferris wheel to the kiddie rides, but Timothy had fallen over. A woman in her 30s picked him up and carried him to a white Volvo in the parking lot of the Sayreville War Memorial High School across the street from the carnival. She then drove away, taking a left turn on Washington Avenue, then the first right onto Lakeview Avenue, and went into one of the cellar-level apartments in the complex. John went on to claim that the woman was neatly dressed, wore glasses, and was possibly named Anna, adding that she had been a waitress, a teacher at a daycare centre, and once worked as an investigator for a private agency. He said that the woman knew Michelle, but that Michelle would not remember her. This too came to nothing. As the search continued, a reward fund was established, and the police searched for anyone who may have had a video recording from the night of the carnival. The story was featured for a second time on America's Most Wanted, and Timothy's picture was added to milk cartons from Farmland Dairies in Wallington, distributed to more than 1,000 stores in New Jersey and New York. Michelle continued to be questioned by the police, and on the 13th of June, after a full day of questioning, she had to be taken to hospital after suffering hyperventilation. Despite these additional questionings, and the knowledge that Michelle had taken a lie detector test, the results of which were not made public, Detective Ken Kelly stated that the request should not imply that she is being arrested or that we are close to something. He went on to say that, "We're going to give it one more shot. Maybe we can get something that was missed." It was constantly reiterated that everyone was a suspect and no one had been ruled out of the inquiry. Over time and across the many different police interviews that Michelle gave, her story as to the events of the night that her son disappeared varied dramatically. Michelle had initially told the police that she had left her son in a queue for a ride, while she quickly grabbed a drink, and upon her return, he was missing. Later, she told the police that she had left Timothy in the queue with a woman who she vaguely knew and a man who offered to watch him while she got her drink, but they had disappeared by the time she had returned. This woman, Ellen, could not be traced. Another version detailed how a woman had snatched Michelle's son from her whilst holding a knife to her throat, and that Timothy would be returned unharmed in a month if she kept quiet. On another occasion, Michelle claimed to have seen a man leading Timothy away from the carnival. In total, she provided at least 7 different accounts of the events of that evening. Timothy's 6th birthday passed with still no knowledge of what had happened to the young boy. Instead of a birthday party, the day was marked with a service at St Mary's Church, praying for Timothy's safe return. Then, in October 1991, 5 months after the disappearance, came the most significant discovery to date. A schoolteacher was walking in the marshlands near the Raritan Center Business Park in Edison when he found a muddy trainer with a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle logo. Whilst it fitted the description of the trainers that Timothy was wearing at the time of his disappearance, Michelle could not be certain that they were the same design. The trainer was sent to the FBI for analysis, and the area in which the trainer was found was searched. No further clues were found, and the analysis of the trainer was inconclusive. However, after Michelle was re-interviewed, It transpired that 3 years earlier she had worked for 6 months at the fulfillment centre in the Raritan Centre, just a few blocks away from where the trainer had been found. Michelle had not included this in the employment history that she had given to the police earlier in the investigation. The following month, a local group was formed named Friends of Timmy to help bring the attention to both Timothy's disappearance and missing children everywhere. As Christmas 1991 approached, there was a photo mailing campaign to more than 52 million mailboxes nationwide. This was organised by the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children under the US Department of Justice. This programme had already had success in reuniting 55 missing children with their families, and it was hoped that they could do the same for Timothy. However, there were still no developments in the case. In early April of 1992, it was reported that Michelle was stepping down from the non-profit group Friends of Timmy, as she felt that some of the items that were being voted on by the board should be her decision as Timothy's mother. Later that month, on the 25th of April 1992, the newspapers ran a headline that everyone had been dreading and yet many thought was inevitable. Missing boy found dead. Wiltsey's remains found in Edison. The report confirmed that 2 days earlier, a second trainer had been found in Edison, and a further search uncovered a skull and other bones partially submerged in Redroot Creek, approximately 125 yards from where the first trainer had been found the previous October. Due to the varying levels of the stream during the year, it may have prevented the bones being discovered during the previous search. Additional items were found in the area: fragments of clothing, a blue blanket, a pillowcase, and a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle balloon. Timothy was positively identified through dental records, and Michelle had been informed of the discovery on the 23rd of April. Timothy's remains were found approximately 9 miles from where his mother claimed to have last seen him. The missing persons inquiry had turned into a murder case. Rumours of Michelle's involvement were still rife and seemed to be fueled by her perceived lack of emotion throughout the ordeal. However, Michelle hit back, saying that, "If I lost my son any other way, I wouldn't have hundreds of reporters banging on my door the day after I learned he's dead, would I? These are not normal circumstances, and no one knows how they would act in my place." She went on to plead with the public to let her grieve in private. On the 5th of May 1992, a man in his 30s walked into the Middlesex County Prosecutor's office and confessed to killing Timothy. He said that he had hit the young boy with his car and killed him. He was thoroughly questioned by the investigators, who concluded that the man had nothing to do with Timothy's disappearance and death. The man's family confirmed that he had psychiatric problems. Due to the level of decomposition, the autopsy failed to establish Timothy's cause or time of death. On the 12th of May 1992, the young boy was finally laid to rest. Shortly afterwards, the FBI bowed out of the investigation due to the lack of federal jurisdiction, and as time went on, it would seem that Timothy's murder would never be solved. Gradually, the news reports died down and the case fell to the back of the minds of all but those directly involved. Then, on the 22nd of January 1994, a news headline brought it to the fore once again. Timothy's mum missing. Murdered boy's mother vanishes. Car found running. Michelle, who had moved to her brother's apartment the previous November after she had been stalked at her own place, had been reported missing. Her family feared that someone may have been exacting revenge, as many still believed that Michelle was responsible for Timothy's death. The mystery was short-lived though, as Michelle turned up in Detroit the following day. She claimed that she had been abducted by 2 FBI agents who wanted to teach her a lesson about her son's disappearance. Federal authorities and the Detroit police said that they did not find her story credible, but continued to investigate. In August that year, Michelle was arrested on charges of falsely reporting that she had been abducted on the morning of January 21st and with the fraudulent misuse of a government seal. The authorities had determined that she actually took a bus to Detroit on the day of the supposed abduction and had also ordered fake FBI business cards in order to lend credibility to her story. As part of a plea deal to avoid prison time, she admitted that she had made up the kidnapping story. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation, and when Michelle was asked why she did it, she simply said, "I don't know." She was sentenced to 6 months house arrest and probation. 3 years later, Michelle was in the news once again. This time she was arrested for stealing a laptop from her former employer. She gave the laptop, valued at around $3,100, to her then boyfriend, Robert Javik, a Union County police officer who, upon realizing that it was stolen, returned the laptop to the company. Michelle claimed that she only stole the laptop because Robert had urged her to. Again, she made a plea bargain, and in February 1998, by which time she was 7 months pregnant, she was sentenced to 3 years probation. The following month, she was sentenced to 1 day in custody and 4 months house arrest for violating the terms of her previous parole. Soon after, she moved to Florida to escape the notoriety that had followed her ever since Timothy's disappearance and murder. She also moved to raise her newborn baby boy closer to her family members. The years passed, and many of the investigators involved in the original inquiry retired. However, the case remained open and periodically appeared in the newspapers in the hope of jogging someone's memory. Then, on what would have been Timothy's 28th birthday, the news broke that Michelle had been arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Now 47 years old, Michelle was living in Port St. Lucie, Florida, with her 2 sons, working as a paralegal. Those who knew her in Florida had no idea that she was the mother of a boy who had been murdered 23 years earlier. She originally remained in custody in Florida before being extradited to New Jersey and was reportedly looking forward to clearing her name once and for all. She said nothing and showed no emotion at a 6-minute hearing on the 16th of September 2014, during which her lawyer entered her plea of not guilty. After various delays, the trial finally got underway in March 2016. During the trial, there were conflicting reports as to how Michelle treated young Timothy. Some would say she was a hard-working single mother who doted on her son, whilst others claimed she never paid the boy any attention and was frustrated that he interfered with her social life. The prosecution case provided details of Michelle's ever-changing account of the night of Timothy's abduction, her behaviour following Timothy's disappearance, and when she was notified that his remains had been found, and also put great emphasis on the blue blanket which was found near Timothy's body. In a 2011 review of the case, an investigator realised that many of the items that had been recovered with Timothy's body had never been shown to anyone other than Michelle and her mother. Both of them said that they had never seen the blanket before. During this review of the case, the blanket was shown to 3 people, babysitters and relatives, who all immediately said that the blanket belonged to Timothy. The prosecution said that this was incredibly significant because when Timothy disappeared, it was the hottest Memorial Day on record, and as such he would not have had the blanket with him. Therefore, whoever dumped his body would have had to have access to Michelle's house to get the blanket. Michelle's defence argued that Timothy was a happy, healthy little boy who loved his mother, and she him. She was a hard-working single mother who did the best for her child in difficult circumstances. The differing version of events told to the police were explained as trauma, and also in some cases because Michelle felt attacked and victimised by their line of questioning. With regards to the blanket, there was no blood, hair, fingerprints, fibres or DNA present. An expert testified that they did not believe the blanket was ever in contact with Timothy, as it would be impossible for there to be absolutely no trace evidence on it whatsoever. They argued that the blanket was unconnected to the case. This, together with the fact that there was no cause of death, no eyewitnesses, and no history of abuse meant that in the defence's opinion there was no way of being able to state that Michelle was guilty of murder. As the jury retired to begin their deliberations, it became known that the foreman of the jury had been dismissed due to them completing independent research on FBI procedures in the early 90s, and in doing so violated both the judge's instructions and their oath as a juror. An alternate juror was selected and the case continued. The 7 men and 5 women of the jury spent approximately 4 hours deliberating over the following 2 days before finally returning their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The defence argued for a new trial on the basis that the dismissed jurors' research could have affected other members of the jury. This was denied. Michelle was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of her firstborn son. She would become eligible for parole from August 2044. Her defence team continued to fight the conviction, pursuing a new trial on the basis that the prosecutors did not produce enough evidence to warrant a guilty verdict, and also that a mistrial should have been ordered following the foreperson's dismissal. This was referred to the New Jersey Supreme Court, who in May 2021 upheld Michelle's conviction, but on a split decision, 3 judges voted that there was sufficient evidence presented for her conviction, whilst the other 3 believed it to be insufficient. Whilst it seemed the legal fight was now over, there was still more to come. In October 2021, it was reported that the Supreme Court would reconsider its split decision, having agreed to take an unprecedented second look at the case with the addition of a tiebreaker, the most senior member of the State Appellate Division, in order to break the 3-all deadlock of the appeal. 2 months later, it was announced that Michelle's conviction had been vacated. The court had ruled 4-3 that the evidence that had been presented was insufficient for a reasonable jury to convict her, stating that the court finds that a rational jury could conclude that Lodzinski did not take Timothy to the carnival, and that she had some involvement in his disappearance, death and burial, but only the purposeful or knowing cause of death constitutes murder. And the prosecution offered no direct or inferential evidence that Lodzinski purposely or knowingly caused Timothy's death. With her conviction vacated, Michelle cannot be retried for the crime, even if new evidence emerges in the future. So what do you think? Was an innocent, albeit inconsistent and unusual mother wrongly pursued for the death of her son, or has Michelle got away with murder? Regardless, it would seem that there is no chance of justice ever being served for a little boy who lost his life way too soon. I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. As mentioned at the start of this video, I have some exciting news about the channel. I've decided to do a series of videos about crimes committed during various holidays throughout the year. New Year's, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Easter, Father's Day, Halloween and Christmas. And I shall be uploading a video a day for 7 days, starting from Saturday the 16th of September. Don't forget to join us for this special week of uploads, and hopefully join the discussion amongst our true crime community in the comment sections of the videos. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye.